afternoon Consonance Courses. Lovely to see you again. And today we are reaching the end of the body of the course. Look at all the good stuff we've done. We have covered acquisition. We have covered the editorial process. We have looked at production. We have attempted to sell some books. And we are finally at the last bit of the process, which is to do with money, giving money back to the originators of the content, making sure that the sales that we have gathered from around the globe are processed properly, put into the right place, and apportioned out to the people who need it. So it's very exciting. We've done the whole range of publishing. And even though it's taken us 5 one-hour sessions to cover all of this, we've still really only scratched the surface. So this time next week for the next session, we're going to be starting the first of a number of deep dives. And we've got some ideas here for parts of the process that we can loop back to and cover again, but in a lot more detail. Very open to ideas on anything that you'd like us to cover as well. But you know, it's been really good to get the full range of the publishing process covered in one big go. And you know, I feel we're all becoming friends now. We're all starting to get a bit familiar with the layout of these sessions. I'm going to tell you what we're going to cover, and then we're going to dive into it. I'm going to go back through the videos and put some chapters in as well, so that when you come to watch these on playback, you'll be able to jump to the bits of the videos more easily. But because we're all friends, I thought I'd share with you what my lunchtime looked like today. This is me and my son striding out towards the slopey bit of the field behind the back of where we live. So it's the most gorgeous day here in northern Scotland. So we are coming live to you on our incredible fibre optic cable buried deep underneath the snow. Modern technology, isn't it extraordinary? Here we are, back in the wilds, but we're able to, you know, share our software with you far and wide. So what are we going to be covering today? We are going to be using our standard process as we've established during this course, to look at the different parts of consonants and how they relate to this aspect of the publishing process. So if you're a consonants user, those words there will be familiar as words from the navigation in consonants. We've got bibliographic, workflow and so forth. And I've deliberately gone a bit spare on some of the detail here, because really this session is slightly different. We are going to be covering a run through of the royalties process. So whilst there's lots of things that the full team can be doing at this stage of the process, we're going to focus on this one important area, which is royalties. So it is vital as ever to get your metadata as up to date as possible. It is vital to manage your workflow properly, etc. But yes, we're going to look at the aspects of consonants as they pertain to the royalties generation process today. So not too much preamble. I'm going to say make sure that you've got your metadata complete. We're going to be using again that import tool, this time to import sales. And then we're going to be referring to the help that is available on our website. I think you can see there it's www.consonants.app and then resources and docs. So this is always available for you to go and review. And because this is such an important aspect of the process, you know, especially when we're dealing with money and payments and people's livelihoods, it's probably a good time to reassert that the documentation is there as a checklist to step through. Even when you've done it 100 times, it's really nice to have some firm information where you can say, yes, I've done this bit, I've done that bit. So we're going to be looking at that today. So let me get the account ready. This is the account that we've been using for the last few weeks on our course. It was a little bit amusing because one of our treasured clients drop me a line to suggest that some of our outlandish product titles here are actually quite similar to books that they're actually publishing. So if you want to play guess which Consonance client might be publishing books like this, then answers on a postcard, please. There will be no prizes, but knowledge of a job well done. So here we are on the dashboard. In previous weeks, we have been looking at different parts of this main menu. On bibliographic, we've been going there quite heavily to look at the products. We've been looking at workflow and production, but now we're casting our eye down to legal and financial. And what I'm going to do, first of all, is do a royalty run and generate some royalty statements. There is a degree of data that needs to be present in the system in order for that to work, but we're going to do the royalty run through first, and then we're going to loop back and see all of the bits of data that have to be in place for that to work. So a bit of a two-stage process here. And speaking of two-stage processes, let's just have a quick look at our documentation, which you can get to either by going Help Documentation through the app, or you can open a new browser in your a new tab in your browser and navigate to www.consonance.app and go to Resources and Docs. In this area, if we look at the top level there, User Docs, then we've got a lot of stuff about all sorts of things, how to and Onyx and blah, blah, blah. Then we've got royalties here. Now, if you're watching this because you're thinking of implementing Consonance, and you're watching this this session because you're hoping to see the degree to which we support various royalties processes, then this is a great place to start. And I would recommend clicking on Implementing Royalties with Legacy Data, unless you're lucky enough to have a complete clean slate with no historical twangles whatsoever. Click on Implementing Royalties with Legacy Data, and that will start to reveal in front of your eyes some of the aspects of this complex area that you're going to have to start reasoning with. So, you know, I shan't read off the screen to you, that would be terribly dry, but this is a great place to get that sort of overview of what is ahead of you if you choose to implement royalties in Consonance. And we're definitely trying here to give you all of the bad news up front. Royalties is a very complicated area. It's knitted in so closely with all of the rest of the system, and that's the real benefit. It's great to not have to maintain a separate royalty system with a duplicated second version of the truth of all of your metadata and work level information and contact and contributor information and contract information. So it's very great that it's baked within Consonance and sits alongside everything. But that's not to say that anything is easy here. This is all a very important area to pay attention to the detail. We try to expose the parts of the process that we don't support particularly well. It's much more important to be upfront with this sort of thing than to find out at the point of pressing the first royalty run button that there's something that we don't support. A great example actually is series editor royalties. We look at royalties through the lens of a work, and that's almost the highest level. Quite a lot of people's contracts, because it's quite easy to do when you're just typing in Word, they give an additional percentage to a series editor, and sometimes that percentage does not come out of the overall pie of the work's sales. So you're almost paying royalties based on, say, 105% of the total available. So we don't support series editor royalties when it takes that sort of form. So this is really the sort of area where you're going to need to talk to us, possibly at great length, before we all dive in and commit to doing a project like this, because it's very important that a royalties project is successful no matter what. this is a question of changing the wheels whilst the car is going down the motorway. And so we have quite a lot of past experience in transitioning you from a previous way of doing royalties, running two royalty processes in parallel, performing a difference to see are the numbers that both approaches produce the same. That gives us all a great deal of confidence and comfort, and then migrating over to Consonance once everybody is comfortable with that. So yes, so absolutely linger on the documentation for as long as you need. When you've read a page like this, if you click on royalties there, you're going to see all of the individual pages that make up our advice here. And I brought you over here because we started to talk about this being a two-stage process, and in its most top-level form, royalties in Consonance is this two-stage process of, first of all, calculating royalties and then generating statements. And those two stages are different because royalties are calculated at the product level, because those are the things that sell, and you sell a book and you want to pay some money out on the basis of the money that has been received in from that book. Fine, so royalties are at product level. Statements are at payee level or contributor level, but a royalty payee does not necessarily have to be a contributor to the work and its products. Might be a literary estate, might be an organisation, might be some other entity. Payees tend to get a royalty statement that is an agglomeration of all of the concerns they have with you. So if there's an author and they have contributed more than one work to your programme, rather than sending them, 6 royalty statements for the 6 works that they've done, we send them one royalty statement with everything aggregated within it. So statements are at pay level. And as I say, royalties are at work level or product level. And so that's the real main difference. So that's what we're going to do. We're going to step through a process of calculating royalties and then generating statements, 2 stages. And then, as I say, we're going to loop back and see all of the information that needs to be in place for that to work. So I am going to navigate to financial and I'm going to see options revealed for me. Now, if you're following along and you've just done that on your account and you think, oh, I've fallen at the first hurdle because I don't see the same words there, fear not. Accounts can be toggled so that certain users and certain clients only see certain functionality. A very brief aside, but from a user license paying point of view, we don't charge additional money to access different parts of Consonance. Everybody can see everything in terms of what their user license allows them to see. However, to make the system more navigable and less cluttered, if you don't need to see royalties, then you don't need to see royalties, so we don't show it. So if you don't see the royalty links information here, then you know the usual drill. Raise a ticket, let us know that you're going to start royalties, and really that's our cue as well for me to start typing urgently to you saying, aha, royalties is it, to check that we're having this sort of conversation, but with an actual human on the other side rather than just a video camera. As I say, very important to talk about royalties and make sure we're getting all of your requirements framed appropriately from the start before we go anywhere. So we've got royalty runs here underneath financial, and we've got royalty statements. This is the 2-stage process. Royalty runs first. So I haven't got anything in here at the moment, nothing up my sleeves. And I'm going to add a royalty run, and I'm going to call it 2024. And I'm going to say that the maximum invoice date is the end of this month. So already we're into the sort of areas where if you're producing royalties and the system isn't necessarily generating numbers that you think matches with reality, it could be because you've put an invoice date in for your particular royalty run and the sales that you're concerned with are after that date. So the maximum invoice date, as you'd expect, is going to set the maximum, try not to say maximum invoice date again, is going to limit the number of the types of sales that are accommodated for on this royalty run based on what their invoice date is. So I'm going to press save on that before repeating myself too much. And a new royalty run has been successfully created. So this is great news. It's got a name, it's got a status which currently is unprocessed. It doesn't have any products on it at the moment, or any payable amounts, and no royalty records. So we have some work to do. So I'm going to click into this, and this message is repeated. No products found. Products can only appear in one unapproved royalty run at a time. So I'm going to find my actions button over here, and I'm going to be presented with a range of options. And I can add all published products if I want. I can add products that have got sales. I can add products that have got sales and some of them have not yet had royalties performed on them. Or I can select products to add from a batch if I've been collecting together products for a particular royalty run. Or I can bring up a drop down for products to add. So depending on your approach here, you'll choose different options. I have to say half the time I choose add all published products, and that's almost the catch-all. You know, I know that I'm not missing anything out at all there. But today I am going to add products with sales, and that gives me Cats of the World and Cats Throughout History. Lovely. And the next time I press that actions button, I have a few more of those options that were greyed out now available to me. I can bail out and start again. I can say, oh no, I should have added different products. I'll add different products. I can remove them all. Or I can choose to analyse products, or I can layer on some more products there. So I'm going to analyse products, and I'm just motoring through this at the moment because I just want you to get a feel for this is a royalty run, and it concerns a list of products, and those products will have sales that I'm going to be able to perform a royalty calculation on. So I'll try not to over explain myself. I'm just going to keep on powering on through. So we have added products, we've analysed the products, that's given us some insight there, and now we're going to execute the calculations. Oh, sounds great. And what that's given us is a new value in the royalty due column. This one is £15, this one is £10 due. So right now, and this is of course fairly trivial because we've got some fake data and there's only 2 products, but I wanted to be able to see the woods for the trees. But what that does give you immediately is a really nice summary number of the royalty that is due on this particular royalty run. And if nothing else, you'll notice that we haven't had to drive through creating royalty statements. You'll notice if we return to the index, I can delete this royalty run if I want to. And this is a key point that I want to drive home. This is not a double entry bookkeeping system. This is not your financial system of record. There's no mention of tax in here. This is a management reporting tool that is taking a mixture of metadata, contact information and sales data and is producing useful numbers. But we're not laying down an audit trail that must not be that must remain in place no matter how many additions or changes you make to this, until such point as we say yes, this is a signed off royalty run, this is approved. We are at liberty to add to this, to add in more products that we might have omitted, to reanalyse products if we realise we've made a data mistake, to keep managing this royalty run until we're satisfied that it reflects reality. So that's just an important point to make. We're not in QuickBooks here or in Sage Accounting. We're in your management reporting system. And so if you look at this number and you think that seems really low, what mistake have I made? What have I missed out? then there's nothing to stop you deleting this whole thing and starting again, going through the troubleshooting documentation, getting in touch with us and raising a ticket, making sure that this is absolutely right. But there's going to be, the computer isn't going to start adding in transactions or doing things that you don't know about. It's all very plain to see on the screen, and it's very undoable. It's very deletable, and there's no integration with other meaningful systems that are going to force you to have to plough on regardless. Very much not the case. As with the rest of Consonance, the system should reflect reality. If you start thinking about workarounds, then that process is wrong. This has to be an appropriate tool for this sort of process, which is dealing with a lot of moving data and getting it right. So, but we don't need to delete this because this is looking fine. And what we've got here is a really nice flag of how much royalty is due based on the workings that we've done at the moment. How much royalty is due for this particular royalty run. And, because we can create royalty runs whenever we want and use it as a management reporting tool, it is a perfectly interesting approach to run royalty runs every month, simply to get this number so that you know what your future liabilities are and you can communicate to your financial team, we have a liability, we have an obligation to reserve in cash such and such an amount, ready to be dispersed amongst our payees at a point in time. So if you need to use this as a useful means of getting a running total of what royalties are looking at based on current sales, then this is a great use of it. So I like that big number there. It tells me what the overall royalty due for this royalty run is. So really, we are done looking at royalty runs. We've got sales on these products. We have clicked our button to say, based on other information in the system, calculate the royalties, and a number has magically appeared. And so we're going to be backtracking to see why in particular £10 has emerged as a royalty due there, why £15 and a penny. But whilst we're on this page, I'll give you a little sneak peek, because if those questions are bubbling up, then naturally one wants to have them answered. And if I click on one of these links here, I'm going to be able to dive down into the detail and see this really interesting page, which is royalty calculations by sale. Now this is a long list page, and I'm keeping this deliberately spare at the moment so that we're not confused. But it says, okay, well, there's this sale. This is the ID. We've got commas in here so that we can make sense of that number. But that's an ID as opposed to a sale quantity or a sale amount. We know what the product is. We know what the sales channel name is. We know what the royalty basis is, and that's discount or net receipts. We know what the base royalty rate is. And then it looks like we must have escalators on this, because if it's 12% on £100, then that's a little bit much. So you'll see we've got a drop down icon there. Clicking on that reveals even more information about this one record. And what I'm hoping to point out here is that for every single sale transaction that gets entered into Consonance, I can hear the cat. For every sale transaction that gets entered into Consonance, we keep a record of exactly what royalty was calculated on that one sale transaction, and when it crossed escalator boundaries, which part of that sale amount was royaltied at what fraction. So this is a wonderful, I said this isn't an audit trail, but it is a fantastic magnifying glass to understand exactly why your royalties have how your royalties have been calculated. So this is very reassuring and comforting to be able to see the detail behind this neatly wrapped up number here. So hitting the back button on the browser, back to my royalty runs. As I say, we're done here on calculating royalties. This is my whole royalty run, and now I can either go off, do something else for 6 months, or I can proceed and generate a royalty statement batch. So that's the next thing on the list here, royalty statements. So I click here and there's nothing yet. So I'm going to add a royalty statement batch, and I'm going to say what the statement date is. And when your account is set up, and it says this in the documentation, you can choose the default frequency over which you produce royalty statement batches. So I've set this up to be 6 monthly because that's quite often the way. Some of our clients are monthly, others are annual, and there's nothing to stop you having ad hoc royalty statements and royalty runs. There's one time I went to a trade fair and sold quite a few hundred copies of a large hardback, and they were £40 each, and I had this cash tin, like a red cash tin, that was burning a hole in my pocket. So I wanted to do a royalty run then and there and not wait 6 months with cash in the office. So we did a one-off royalty run for that, got that cash out, and then carried on as usual 6 months later. So if you have reasons to do ad hoc royalty runs like that, then you can do that. I'm going to hit create, and now we've got a statement batch. And again, there's not much going on here. We haven't got any contacts in it. We haven't got any statements yet, and its status is new. And again, I can delete this if I want to back out, and there's not going to be a trail kept. I'm just going to click on the edit button there to dive in and see a bit more information. So royalty statements, as I said earlier, we are now at the pay level. And that's why it says no contacts found. A contact can be a person or an organisation, and we would expect to see them listed on this page, just as on the royalty run page we saw products listed. And we've got an actions button, fewer options this time, but it's all about which contacts we're going to add to this particular royalty statement batch. Is it going to be all of them? Is it going to be individual ones? Well, I'm going to choose all of them because there are precious few in the system at the moment. So I've got my contacts who I want to be receiving royalty statements in this batch. And now when I look at actions, I've got a few more options available. So I'm going to click on generate statements. I thought I'd have more time to have a slurp there, but no. So it says statements have been successfully generated. And just a little note of disambiguation here. The statements have been generated so that they sit within Consonance, and there's data that tells us who's going to get what. There's PDFs that can be produced that are printouts of those statements, and we'll be selecting which ones we're interested in and downloading those in just a minute. But for the moment, we're going to look at Mary Glover's statements here. So this is the first time Consonance has been used for this, but if there was a previous statement, then that would be linked to there with a number. The statements in this batch, there's only one, and there's 4 contracts in this batch. So clicking on the drop down there shows a bit of an overview, and if there are contact information, then that would be fine. I can download the individual PDF at this point. So if I want to, if this is a tiny statement batch and I'm happy to just download a PDF one at a time, I can do that. Or I can preview the statement data here. And then you'll also see that there's a tab here, and I can click on Cats Throughout History, and I'll see that Cats Throughout History and Cats of the World are dealt with on this one statement, and I get another chance to download the PDF here. I'm just going to download the PDF so that you can see the sort of thing. Now, I haven't set it up to have any of the furniture at the top. There's no logo, there's no publisher address, there's no pleasant bit of text. This is all configurable through the interface, so you'll want to have your name there, but I grew weary of putting feline press everywhere, so we're just looking at the numbers today, the hard business numbers. And so this is the cover page, and the first thing you'll see is the cumulative summary, and it tells us what the units sold are, which is 20. It tells us what the net sales revenue is, which is £200. We're in GBP here, so this reflects the base currency that your account is set up in. I'm working in GBP here, British pound. The next bit down is royalties, and it says that the net royalties are £22.51. We've also got a note of advances, and in fact advances that have been paid. So that's great. £400 has already been sent to this payee in advance of going to publication. And so actually the royalties due are negative because Mary Glover has not yet earned out that £400 advance. So you might recall from previous sessions we talked about the difference between advances and payments, and we were on the contract edit page and we added in an advance, which is our promise to pay some money. And then we said, and it's got a pay date, which added in also a payment record. But these two things are subtly different. Advances are what you say you're going to pay. Payments are what you've paid. So we've got this summary information on here, and this is the cover sheet that Mary Glover will receive, giving her the information about what she needs. And I'm going to leave you just to stare at the next page while I put the cat out of this office. So professional. 3, 2, 1. Yes, Jan, I know. All right, there you go. Good girl. Oh. Feline press is right. And so this is the second page of the royalty statement. And what we've got are 2 contracts. And so do you remember I mentioned, authors and other contributors might have contributed to more than one work that you've published. And so it's nice to be able to present all of the information aggregated within one royalty statement. So that's why we have one section for Cats of the World, one section for Cats Throughout History. And because this is the first ever statement that has been done for this completely imaginary press and this completely imaginary person, the period sales and the life sales and royalties are identical. But as you'd expect, over time, the next ones, the period sales will say whatever they'll say, and the life sales will provide that cumulative view. Now, behind the scenes, when we calculate royalties, we always look at the lifetime sales for one very good reason, and that is escalators. Escalators are a mechanism whereby if, as a publisher, if as Feline Press, we sell, say, 1,000 copies of the hardback of Cats of the World, then we might want to agree with Mary Glover up front that once that threshold is passed, we're going to change the royalty rate. We're going to add an additional 2% onto the royalty rate. We might want to do that based on the quantity or the sale value or even a date. For the first 12 months we'll pay X and thereafter we'll pay Y. We might want to base it on the discount that we give to the retailer. So if it's a very high discount sale, 75% or more, we might, be able to agree with the author or agent that it's reasonable that there's a lower royalty to be paid because it's approaching sort of a remainder territory. So for all sorts of reasons, the royalty rates can go up and down, and that means that when we're looking at royalties, we have to look at the whole period of their life as opposed to only what's happened in the last 6 months or 12 months or 1 month. So really it's these life sales and life royalties that to me are the most interesting numbers. And then the period royalties and the period sales are the summary of just a more recent time. So it's this sort of printout that the author receives. It's this sort of printout that is useful for you to see in checking the royalties. I've hit the back button because it's exactly the same numbers as you'll see on the preview, which is what you'll see on the royalty statement area. But because Consonance is a website, it has the benefit of links, and so we can jump to different areas to drill down further into the detail. But you know, the advances were £400, and if we skip down and look there, the total payments were £400. So great, the advance has been paid off. Yes, the advance has been paid off, but not yet earned out. There's a quantity amount, there's a net sale amount, there's the gross royalties. There's reserves against returns, which can be managed within the contract. So that is to say, if you're a trade publisher in particular, and subject to the vagaries of the book trade, which seems to still, in its rather antediluvian way, send books back that have not been sold within a certain period of time. If you as a publisher would like to provide some buffer against that, and to ask for a reserve against those returns for perhaps the first 6 or 12 or 18 months of the book's life, then you can set that up on the contract, and that's quite normal. Then we've got net royalties and any royalties paid. So you notice we're marking the difference between an advance that's been paid and royalties that's been paid. I mean, really, it all aggregates out. It doesn't really matter, but it's really nice to have this, you know, real depth of insight and historical data accuracy, so that you can look back and see exactly what happened and when. But you know, we're trying to do that balance of giving you a lot of the detail, but without it being an overwhelming mess. So we're only showing information when it's relevant. So, you know, for instance, publishing fees and alternative payees, those didn't appear on the PDF that we saw there because there's no data there. Adding a label in when there's no data on an author-facing PDF just seems like clutter rather than something helpful. So, you know, we're trying to present data where it exists, and where it should exist, and not otherwise. Publishing fees, by the way, are fees that you would charge to a payee for services that they're going to provide, that you're going to pay for. Alternative payees are things such as maybe your author would like to donate their royalties to a charitable fund that you run, or perhaps you've got an agreement that there's going to be 10% of an author's receipts going to an alternative payee. I mean, even the HMRC could be an alternative payee there if you did want to take that upon yourself. So there's various layers of complexity that can unfold. But this is really the summary of what the royalty statement looks like. And then just to round off this, I mean, it's 40 minutes in, but round off this quick run through of the two-step process, I'm going to show you how to get these out of the system, and I'm going to select all of the 2 royalty statements that are there at the moment, click on zip and download statements, and that's going to zip up exactly those PDFs that we've seen into a zip file that we can download to the desktop. And that is where Consonance's involvement in royalties ends, with the exception of recording within the system what you actually pay out to your payees. Because without that information, Consonance is going to assume that you haven't paid any of these royalties, and in the next period it's going to say, well, you still owe, you know, such and such an amount. So there's a final part, which is either typing in or uploading payments once you've paid them through your bank. There's no integration with any banking software. There's no integration with an email service. We're not emailing out these PDFs on your behalf to authors and agents. And we're not providing an author portal that your authors can log into to interrogate this in real time. We're drawing the line at saving you the administrative burden that we've saved you up to this point, but this is the stopping point for Consonance's feature set. So let's loop back and see some of the detail behind being able to do that royalty run and emitting those royalty statements. So let's have a look. Back on the royalty run, I think we'll go, because this is the list of products, and it's got Cats of the World and it's got Cats Throughout History. So I'm going to go to Cats of the World, and I'm going to see, how did Consonance know what royalty rates to pay? And that was in the contract area. So let's have a look at the parts of the contract page that enable us to calculate royalties. So one of the things I could do is type royalties into the filter here, and that's going to start giving me only the regions that are relevant and interested in royalties. And bingo, it's got me the bit I'm really interested in. It's also got pulled up an area about royalty statements here. So this is starting to unfold some of the complexity, isn't it? You know, if you want to define the statement frequency contractually with your payees, you can do that. If you want to start talking about having a lag between getting sales in and those sales appearing on statements, then you can add that here. If you want to insist that there's a minimum number of sales months achieved before any royalties start flowing out, then that's set up here as well. And it's the usual thing, you know, you double click, you've got your information here, you can do interesting things. There's another option within this area, and this is contract sets. So, you know, we were looking at the royalty, the PDF, and it had 2 contracts on it, and then the cover page was an aggregation of the data for both of those contracts. Well, sometimes it's not appropriate to have everything from a particular payee on one document. Sometimes it's more appropriate to send out individual PDF statements, 1 per contract. And if you want to insist on that, then you can set up something called a contract set, and you can say, I'm going, for this Cats of the World, bundle together only the contracts that are within the contract set, only cats. So you can use this to say, well, that's just one, there's 1 contract within this contract set, or you could add as many as you wanted in there. I mean, a great use case for that actually is agents. You know, you might want to be having an agent, a literary agent, as the payee, and you definitely can't have different authors' information all mungled up on one royalty statement for all of the authors of a literary agent. But you might want to say, well, let's group all of author A's information together. You know, they're a client of this agent, and group together all of author B's information. They're also a client of this agent. So the agent gets 2 bundled up PDFs, 1 for each author. So it's really clear that, you know, that's sort of scoped appropriately. And you do that by saying, well, there's 2 contract sets and adding the contract to the relevant contract sets. So that's quite a nice little additional feature. Ideally, you take the path of least resistance and have cross-accounted royalty statements. That's also beneficial for everyone, because it means that if one work does really, really well, and let's say you owe the author £10,000 royalties, and one work sadly does catastrophically badly and has lots of returns, and then in theory that account is like down £10,000, it makes sense to my mind that the amount of money flowing out of the publisher would be 0, because plus 10,000 and minus 10,000 evens out. But if you don't cross account, if you don't have everything referenced on one PDF, then you are obliged to send out £10,000 when unfortunately there's a big deficit over here. It is absolutely the case that you run your business how you want to run your business, properly and appropriately, and then Consonance must match that reality. So, you know, contract sets is a good example of, you know, this is a way to manage properly this eventuality. don't start thinking about trying to create workarounds, because workarounds beget workarounds. and it's much better to try to remain very true to reality. Other things on the contract that are relevant to royalties are remittances, which is payees and how much they get. So here we are. We've got 2 payees on this contract, and there's no necessity for them to be contributors to the work. You know, contributors are handled on the metadata page in terms of the bibliographic angle, but here we're talking about the people who receive income from the sales of this work. So that's articulated here, and then it can be articulated how much each of those contributors gets, and it can be split out by product format as well. There is a limit to this. You know, you can imagine that there's other inventive ways that contracts could be put together that this approach does not handle, but this gets you most of the way there for most of your records. And you know, consonance is this. There's a lot of validation that goes on this data, because it's really important that you don't, for instance, try and pay 9,000% of a sum of money, because that could get you into trouble quite quickly. So you can see that Consonance is going to check that the amounts here add up to a mathematically reasonable total. So that's the percentage splits there. This was the area that we looked at last week to do with advances and payments, so I won't dwell on that too much. I mentioned reserves against returns, so we can see here that that's where you can set that up. And you know, always rely on looking at these help areas for a real deep dive into you know, when your head is in the game and you're thinking about this stuff. That's the best time to read this sort of dense documentation. But you know, if you're thinking, does this suit my use case? Am I talking about a reserve, or am I talking about a publishing fee that I want to claw back over time? Then stick your head in this information and also raise a ticket, and we can talk it through. The other aspect that comes up in royalties, of course, is the printing on the PDF of this information. And this is such a strength of Consonance, because think about it, the information that goes onto the PDF contract, which you download up there, is the same data in a database that is used to calculate the royalties, you know, 18 months after signature or 12 months after signature. So it's a source of great solace to have the same system generating the PDF contracts, and also using that data to calculate the royalties as well. You know, a real testament to that sort of one version of the truth ideal, where we know that we don't have to introduce error by copying and pasting between different accounts. And I mean, the same goes for the people list as well, you know, the contacts list. It makes a lot of sense for the contact information to sit very close to both the bibliographic and the contract area. Anyway, so those are the big chunky areas on the contract that you'll need to fill in order for royalties to be generated. But I'm going to just now focus on the royalty specifiers. So royalty specifiers, as you can sort of see at a glance, are to do with percentages, and it's the percentage of sales, and I say that with a funny looking at the camera like that, because that can either be the money that you've received in from the retailer, which means minus their discount, or it can be the list price multiplied by the quantity, which we'd call, you know, list price basis. So there's all sorts of permutations, and if you've ever brushed up against royalties, your mind will be abuzz with, you know, do they handle this, do they handle that? And the answer is maybe, depends what you're talking about, talk to us, and then we'll talk about it. But I'm just going to double click on some of these to give you a sense of what can be what can be articulated in terms of royalty rates, royalty specifiers. We're at the work level here. This is a fairly new addition to Consonance. Thank you very much to the client who is hopefully listening, who suggested that this would be a good idea. So we agree. This is the work level, and you can see at a glance that all sales that happen at the work level, unless they're overrode by a lower level, like at the product level or lower than that, by default we're going to pay 10% of net receipts. And then there's all of these different levels at which you could say, except for when, and except for when. Oh, except for when they're gratis sales, in which case we'll do something else. Oh, except for, so you can have that nice layering on. But I'm going to double click on this discount one at the top here, and then you can and at each level you can articulate the royalty specifier in this sort of way. So here we're saying that the royalty calculation is going to be based on discount, which is the amount of money that you get in from the retailer after you've given them a hefty discount. So say the list price, the price printed on the back of the book is £10. If you're giving Waterstones a 50% discount, then you're only going to get in £5. And so if you're paying 10% on £5, that's very different from paying 10% on £10. So that's what this is. That's what this is laying out. If you do want to pay 10% on £10, then you click this button, which is list price. And then there's layering in, and I'm glancing at the time, there's layering in of how specifically you would want any discount escalators on a list price to be added. It can be additive, which is usual, or multiplicative, which is more rare. And we can work through one of those probably in a deep dive, I think. So that's the basic rate for all sales of this work across all contributors. And then we can start layering on various different escalators, as I mentioned earlier. So the quantity escalator, we could say, well, for the first 1,000 units, then please bump that up by 2 percentage points. And then after 3,000 units are sold, let's bump it up even further. So you can layer that on. You can't layer on a discount escalator here because we're not at list price. So it doesn't really matter what the discount rate would be because we've already factored that in. This is a discount sale. But we could say a royalty value escalator. So you can see, mixing and matching these different escalators, it almost defies a pocket calculator. By the time Consonance comes to calculate this royalty, it's quite challenging to be able to emulate that calculation on a calculator. So that's why that royalty, that sale royalty view that I showed you earlier is so great, because that gives you the actual, the picked apart, we've applied this escalator at this level, and that's why the numbers come out at £15 and 2p or something. So that's quite heartening. So yes, so you can layer up information like that. I'll just hit cancel there though, because that's a bit weird. This is what it looks like, with a sale value escalator. For sales between £0 and £21, we're going to pay 12% of net receipts. For £22 to £32.99, we'll pay 15, and 33 plus we'll pay 16, and that's the sort of output that's derived from the data that's been entered. And then, as I say, if you want to override that, you can. And so you could say, but actually for sales that we make through this home trade channel, which is our own word, what's the difference going to be? And so you can set that up. That's information that needs to be put in at the contract level so that the system knows what rates need to be paid on what sales, and to whom, who are the payees. The last bit I want to show you, just before we stop this particular investigation into royalties, is on how to get the sales data into the system, because previously I sort of blithely went to the sales transactions and there they are magically sitting there. There are a couple of different ways. You can add a sale manually through typing into the system. I very rarely use that because sales tend to come in spreadsheet format en masse. So instead, I use the sale import, and what I do is download the sale template. I think I can show you the one I did earlier, as it were. It comes like this. So there are certain fields that you have to fill in, and you got it. You can go to the documentation and get the absolute detail of exactly what to do. So I'm just going to show you that you go to imports, import sales, and here is, column by column, a good long rich list of exactly what needs to be what and where. So that's quite useful. Tells you this is the date format that we're expecting, and so forth. Yes, so this is the sale template. I've chosen here to use the ISBN as an identifier, but you can use other identifiers if they're more convenient. And here is my channel ID. Now, you remember earlier we were looking at, well, just a second ago, we were looking at rates and percentages, and we were saying we're going to pay 10% on home trade. Well, this is how you tie that together. So if you are, and again, it's based on the real world, whatever you want to happen. If it's cost you a lot of money to get sales from your export markets, and you need to pay a lower royalty rate as a result, then articulate those sales, based on whatever you want that channel to be. Set that channel up in Consonance, set your royalty rates up to express that required percentage, and that's how that can work together. Here's the sales date. Remember, right back at the beginning we said max invoice date. Well, this is the invoice date for the sale transaction. So if we were to put that in as 2032, Happy New Year, then that's not going to be included in the 2024 royalty run. And then the only other required fields are the sale quantity and sale value. You can use this to put in negative quantities, because oftentimes we're copying pasting from our distributor system. So it's nice to be able to, again, no workarounds. If it's a return, then put in a return, and then you've got your certainty. And we can also, if the sales are coming in from a partner of yours in a currency that isn't your base currency, then Consonance can perform a conversion based on the current exchange rate. So that's all possible. And then we would import that, and Consonance will catch any funny business if there's a typo, or if there's an ISBN that doesn't match an ISBN in your system, or if there's I can't think of any other errors that might occur, but there may be other errors, and that would get caught before importing. So we have covered, in quite a whistle-stop way, I think, the bulk of the royalty process. And you'll know by now what we do is it's a two-stage process. We set up a royalty run, then we generate royalty statements, we import sales to make that happen. There are other imports, which you might remember from previous sessions, to get all of that data set up in the first place. And it's very much an individual thing. Talking to us about the onboarding process for setting up a new royalty project is very necessary, because you will have things unique to your data that we'll enjoy talking about. So I hope that's been enormously rewarding and enjoyable and fun, talking about royalties. I haven't touched on rights and permissions, but they can be part of that. This area is full of rich pickings for further deep dives, so don't hesitate to ask if there are any other parts of that process that you would like me to cover in more detail. But I'm going to call that the end of the main Consonance course. Very exciting. Thank you very much indeed for following along. Don't forget to like and subscribe. And don't forget to keep a watch out for future deep dives that we're going to schedule here. It's going to be the same sort of pace, weekly, live on a Thursday afternoon, but otherwise we can see you